Welcome, beautiful people of all ages, shapes, and colors, to another episode of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast. We encourage you to stick to the basics. I'm one of your hosts, TV, aka TV on basketball, alongside my co-host, Batman? Is that Batman over there in the costume? Is it Jay? Who is it? What's up, man? How's it going?
I am the hero the city needs.
I don't know if you guys see over here, but we kind of have a new co-host on the podcast today. Um, I don't know how much of the screen is taking up for you guys, but yes, we're going to be talking basketball today. It's going to be a great time. And Jay, unfortunately, has lost the first month of the Daily NBA Picks Challenge, so he has to wear this Batman costume. Let's see how long it's going to take. I'm not going to, forcefully have him on the whole episode, depending on how comfortable he is or how uncomfortable it is. How you feeling, Jay, by the way? How does it feel talking out of this Batman mask?
Nah, man, I'm not gonna lie to you. I mean, this is the first time I've worn this thing in Lord knows how long. So the fact that I can even see kind of remotely through this thing is kind of a good sign. But as far as the NBA is concerned, dude, we are in a weird time, bro. We are in a weird time. We were talking about it before the podcast started, and the player movement that we could see within the next couple of months is pretty insane. And we know that nothing's gonna truly start to percolate right until at least the start of 2026 because it needs to hit around January 15th for some of the players that we think could be on the move to really become available, right? The smaller names that have valuable salaries that can get packaged together and stuff like that. Those things are still going to have to be the first dominoes to fall before we see some of these names that we've been hearing about for the last couple of weeks, the LaMelo Balls. We talked about John Morant, Trey Young. It seems Giannis Antetokounmpo now, Zion Williamson. Like these names are popping up, and they're popping up really fast. But at the end of the day, we're not going to see anything for another couple of weeks. But that's the dramatic part about the NBA is just when you think things are calm, here comes the storm that starts to pick everything up, and then all of a sudden we're going to see a bunch of moves in the NBA. And TV, we learned last season. No one's safe, dude. If Luka
Nothing's off the
Doncic can get
table.
traded, if Luka Doncic can get traded, who can't get traded? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, nothing is off the table. And again, like Jay mentioned, there's 2 dates you got to look out for. December 15th, when all the free agents who
Mhm.
signed over the offseason are available to be traded. And then January 15th, basically everyone in the league is able to be traded. So those are the 2 dates you got to
Mhm.
be looking for. So you already know. The NBA is going to start to ramp up during that time as well. We're going to be talking more trade packages like we did a few weeks back. But we'll get to that a little bit later, Jay. Because we are now a quarter into the season. And we're gonna check out the NBA stock market for a while. We're gonna see the stocks of some teams, some guys you want to, buy low on, sell high, all that type of stuff. We're gonna go into that episode today. Going into that in today's episode, but we're also gonna go into some probably unexpected news. Probably one of the biggest breaking news of the season so far. And we're gonna talk about that as well, talking about the Chris Paul stuff. You already know we're gonna have our big thoughts on that. So it's gonna be a pretty big episode. Make sure you sit back, relax, and enjoy. And we're gonna get into it very shortly. But before we do that, Batman, we do have to plug our other platforms. Make sure you follow our individual socials at TV on Basketball, at the Routine Jumper. Those links can be found in the description down below. In terms of the Hit Your Free Throws podcast, make sure you follow us on TikTok and Instagram for the best daily NBA content. That's where you get the picks, the news, the different series that we have going on, the clips, all that stuff can be found over there. If you're listening to any on any of our podcast networks, Spotify, Apple, make sure to leave a review, subscribe, all that good stuff. And if you're watching us on YouTube, remember to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you will not miss an episode. We appreciate all of you. The last episode was doing numbers, by the way, almost 200 views on that episode alone. So thank you again for supporting the podcast and all of that stuff. And yes, we have another great one up for you today. So sit back, relax, and we're gonna get into it. Jay, Batman. Are you ready to get into today's topics?
Yeah, man, let's lock in.
Let us lock in, and we are going to start to talk about probably the biggest news for whoever woke up today. Because this news broke, Jay, what did you say at what, 3 a.m.?
It was at 3 a.m., bro. This was insane. I'm usually not awake for these kind of things, but like this was nuts.
Yeah, there's a Chris Haynes report that came out this morning that Chris Paul, yes, Chris Paul, the guy who just a week or two ago announced that this is going to be his retirement tour, announced this is going to be his last season in the NBA, joined the LA Clippers, the team where he is probably, I don't know, you can argue with BJ or not, is the greatest Clipper of all time, Paul, probably.
Pretty safely. I mean, you have to think about it. He easily defined the 2010s for the Clippers easily
Yeah.
by himself.
Yeah, no, he was definitely, especially the leader of that team for sure. So I think we can comfortably say that he is the best Clipper of all time. Just got released, and Chris Paul's words on his Instagram story got sent home. And all of a sudden, this season from hell that this Clippers team has been going through, currently at 6-15 or 5-16, I forgot which one was which, but a horrible season to start off with, took away the biggest redeeming quality, which was the Chris Paul retirement tour, and now the bad PR somehow gets doubly worse after all
Mhm.
this. Jay, your reaction to the news? I mean, you saw it when it broke. Probably a little bit weary at 3 a.m. in the morning, but I want to hear your initial thoughts.
Yeah, man. I think the weirdest part about the whole thing is obviously just that, as you mentioned at the top, like this was the only good PR that this team had coming into the season. I mean, a lot of people are gonna forget the part where Kawhi Leonard had an entire payment scandal with a whole company not real slash real called Acquisition, and that was before the season had even really kicked off. James Harden has been disgruntled over the last couple of weeks with the losing they've done currently. Um, Oh, by the way, Bradley Beal, the acquisition you made in exchange for Norman Powell, who's absolutely balling for the Miami Heat right now. Yeah, he's going to miss the rest of the NBA season due to an injury, as if he wasn't already dealing with a ton of injury issues coming into LA from last season. Brooke Lopez looks like an absolute shell of himself, and it looks like the idea of letting him walk in favor of Miles Turner from Milwaukee actually played out really well, despite the fact that maybe you didn't want Miles Turner on that price tag. At least the idea of trying to upgrade the center position was the smart idea rather than tying yourself to Brook because it looks like he's cooked. And just when you thought that things couldn't get any worse, now your franchise legend, and TV, by the way, and I'm sure you'll go into this a little bit, but like, TV, this is the second time that a guy that pretty much is the best thing that's ever happened to the Clippers in recent memory positions himself to be the feel good story of the organization and they backdoor him. If you remember the Blake Griffin situation, you signed a 5-year Supermax extension. He goes in front of a press conference and says, I want to be a Clipper for life. And within what, weeks, if not less than that, you flip him to the Detroit Pistons. And no disrespect to the Pistons, they're in a much better position right now. But when he flipped them to the Pistons, they were a much different franchise back then. Let's just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
And so doing this, and TV, the other thing that's so nuts about it is he just told you guys a few days ago, essentially, that he would be retiring at the end of the season, which pseudo implies a farewell tour, right? Which by itself could generate so much positivity around not just the locker room, but around the franchise for people to want to come see the games just to see if Chris Paul plays, just to see Chris Paul get a couple buckets, just to see Chris Paul have a couple fancy lob passes, right? To kind of give him a little bit of a mini highlight reel before his career ends. And instead, and he's not released because technically they can't do that because of the whole 14-man roster thing, but they're basically sending this man to go sit on the couch until they can either find a trade for him or find a feasible way to go about filling that spot and replacing him. But you did so, and you did so in the most inhumane way possible because I don't know if you realize this, TV, but he got this phone call essentially while in Atlanta. They're on a road trip right now.
They have 3 more games on this road trip, too.
Yeah. Like, everything about this is bad. Sending your franchise GOAT home just days after announcing that he would be retiring. Mind you, Chris Paul is on a minimum. He's not killing anybody by being present. And then their reasoning was super weird too. But I'll pass it to you and get your thoughts. But there was just, this is a very dysfunctional situation and just further proof that the Clippers are, they're one of those franchises that you just can't trust with this kind of operation, man. You just can't. They're one of the franchises that I don't care how much money Steve Ballmer has, they're just not ran well, and they just feel like they never have been.
Yeah, 100%. This whole thing is messy. Just some follow-up reports on this, by the way. There's been like some extra stuff coming out saying that him and Tyronn Lue have not been on speaking terms for the last couple weeks. That he has rubbed people the wrong way because the way he was trying to take over the locker room. Mind you, this team is 5-16. They're having probably the most disappointing season out of any team in the NBA, especially with the talent that they have on the roster, the moves that they made for this roster, and this is the first time, Jay, in a while, that Chris Paul has not been on a winning team. So to
Yeah.
say that players and staff weren't receiving this well, coming from a guy who every place he's gone to, we've talked about it, whether it's the Spurs, whether it's the Phoenix Suns, whether it's the OKC Thunder, the New Orleans Hornets / Pelicans at the time, just makes them a better team. And the fact that he comes to this Clippers team, who are coming off a 7-game series in round one of the NBA playoffs last year, and you're not receptive to the feedback, to the criticism for a guy who just knows how to win, just screams just lack of accountability all the way around for me. And it really sucks. Because again, this is the GOAT of your franchise history, the guy who defined Lob City. Yes, people will think Blake Griffin for the highlight dunks, DeAndre Jordan for the highlight dunks. You know who's been passing those balls on basically 99% of those clips? Freaking Chris Paul. The guy who hit the floater game winner over San Antonio on a bum hamstring. Yes, that was Chris Paul. The guy who gave everything to the Clippers organization. And then to get backdoor like that is just horrible all around. And like you mentioned it, Jay, it's not like it's cutting costs. He's on a freaking minimum. Like, what move could you possibly make that could be like, okay, we had to get rid of Chris Paul in this sense to make room for this guy because he's definitely going to turn the season around. No one's turning the season around, by the way. Like they dug themselves in this hole, and we knew going into the season that there was no more moves to make. They put all the chips in the middle of the table, and it's really backfiring on them. So them moving off Chris Paul doesn't do this any better. Nothing. And honestly, like you mentioned, makes things worse. So the more I think about this team, and then we'll talk about how this kind of ties into like how I view the Brooklyn Nets as well. This team is just not serious. This team, whether it's the Nets, whether it's the Clippers, they're in the shadow of these big franchises in the Knicks and Lakers. And to be honest, those two teams have been run probably the best for for the last 5, 6, 7 decades, and they know how to make themselves big in those type of markets. The Nets and Clippers, no matter what they do, will always feel like second fiddle to them. Even when they try to catch up, they'll try to feel second fiddle to them. And these type of moves are a reason why they're always gonna be second fiddle because you just don't treat franchise legends like this. No way, no how. This is horrible, especially for.
I mean, that's the thing, right? I think the biggest thing is not really the action itself, it's the process, right? Because it's not act like Chris Paul is like been heavily featured in the rotation
Yeah,
and like contributing at a high level and stuff. Like he's coming off the bench, he's averaging less than 3 points per game. He literally was in garbage time against the Miami Heat, like their last game where they were down by like 30 plus. Like he's in a very foreign time of his career, and he should be. He's 40 years old. It's very foreign for a lot of players to still even be active in the NBA at this age. Obviously, LeBron James is the only other real representation we have of that in today's game right now. But all of that to say, like, the idea of sending him home doesn't even feel like the craziest thing in the world if you feel like there's a real issue to be had. But then you look at some of the other background information that's been added, like what Brian Windhorst or even Lou Williams have said, where it was like it sounded like the reason why they sent him home was because the locker room didn't respond well to Chris Paul's leadership style, it felt like, basically, right? And I think that the same storyline could be said by anybody and it would still be accurate. You know what you signed up for. It's Chris Paul.
yeah.
Like, and I'm not saying this to like demean him. I'm saying this to say that this is stuff that's been reported, understood for years within his career. One of the reasons why the Houston Rockets didn't work out to its fullest capacity was because he and James Harden bumped heads based off of the way that Chris Paul leads. Chris Paul's interaction with someone like I believe like didn't I mean even the Dwight Howard
Yeah.
time frame, like that was an issue. Chris Paul with the Clippers, you've heard people like JJ Redick or even Blake Griffin like be like that dude. He was a different type of dude. He was a great difference maker, but he was also an asshole. Like and not meaning it in necessarily a negative way, but highlighting that like he just goes about things a very different way. And I think that Chris Paul specifically, his his approach to the game is very anti to the approach of someone like Ty Lue, who feels like this kind of like happy-go-lucky, players-friendly coach who's very vibe-centric, where like he just kind of tries to keep everything mellow and he tries to keep everything low key. And he's very he takes very well to his superstar. Let me put it that way. With guys like Paul George who have come through there, or even Kawhi Leonard now, who are more of like quiet individuals for the most part and more mellowed out individuals, he takes very well to that kind of player build because he's like that. And Chris Paul is the antithesis of that. And I think that any of the things that he was saying in the locker room, as far as things like getting back on defense and different things like that, it just felt like maybe he was overstepping his boundary. But for a 5-6 basketball team, I don't think it hurts to get a little bit of advice about effort. Because you don't look like a team that's like putting too much of that together right now. Because outside of James Harden and Vic Zubac, you haven't had much of anything. Kawhi Leonard doesn't count. He's only played 11 games this season. So what do you like? I don't know. I think the handling of this is worse than the actual choice to send him home. The handling of it makes you feel like the Clippers just don't never they never know how to win the press conference. You could get away with bringing him off the bench or giving him coach DMPs because of just like the flow of the situation. But you send him home and you're erasing so many things, right? You're messing with the legacy aspect of him in terms of how he finishes his career, not being able to finish his career on his terms. And it doesn't mean that he won't end up on a team, but like, what if he doesn't want to end up on a team? Like, the only reason he went to the Clippers was because he said it was going to be either the Clippers or the Lakers because of being close to home.
Yeah.
So who says he goes anywhere else? Like, I saw somebody on Twitter that said like it only makes sense that if he goes anywhere, he goes back to where it started and where he had, arguably the most impact while also getting a free run. Well, not arguably the most impact, because I wouldn't say it's that, but he started his career technically in Oklahoma City, right?
Yeah.
And you think about the stop that he made in Oklahoma City and the impact that he had on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and no one will say that he's the person who turned Shai into the MVP that he is now, but I'm sure that even Shai would credit CP for helping him get to where he is at this current point in time. So many would say that he'd go there, but isn't that the exact opposite of the reason he chose to go back to the Clippers in the first place? So it's just weird, bro. It's just weird.
It is a
Very.
really weird situation. And it just continues to pile on for already an horrible Clippers campaign. Like you mentioned, it's been bad PR after bad move after bad move. It's been like the season from hell from the Clippers. And this, somehow, some way, we didn't think it could get twice as worse, but somehow it has. And only the Clippers seem to do this. And to mention the reason I mentioned the Brooklyn Nets before, because I had this thought coming into this podcast even a few days before, and after all this happened and all of the conversations that we had, the Clippers don't even have control of their own pick. They look horrible. OKC might get another top 5 pick. The Bonza, the therapies, and all that. That could continue to go into the OKC farm system. It made me think of the Brooklyn Nets because one, they're both they're both the little brothers of the people in their own city. Knicks, the Lakers, you know how it goes. But then these two teams tried to make moves to kind of match that level, to say, okay, I'm no longer the little brother here anymore. Let me get some Hall of Famers in the Brooklyn Nets case, and Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, Jason Terry. In the Clippers sense, we're no longer the little brothers here in LA anymore. We want to compete. We get Paul George and Kawhi. We'll bring the two Cali boys over here, and we're going to win a championship. But then you look at the return. And then, of course, you think of the Brooklyn Nets return. They traded away the Jaylen Brown pick. They traded away the Jason Tatum pick and basically built the current day Celtics as we know and love it.
Pretty much.
We go to the Clippers. They traded. By the way, he was already in the league. They traded Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who may be in line for his second MVP in a row, on the 19th, I think the 20-1 OKC Thunder.
They're 21-1 now. Yeah.
21-1 now. A million draft picks, as we always like to look back at. One of them being J-Dub, one of them being Jaime Jaquez, who ended up going to the Miami Heat. A bunch of draft picks, and now for the final piece, a potential top 5 pick. And it made me think, Jay, and like I'm gonna throw this over to you.
Mm-hmm.
The Clippers trade at this point, when looking at revisionist history, obviously at the time, people are like, oh, if you can get Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, you have to make that move if you're the Clippers. You want to be trying to win a championship now, this is the move to do it. But now looking back at revisionist history, is this worse than the Brooklyn Nets trade? Is this like going to be on par? Because this is looking like, with all the pieces coming back and the fact that this Thunder dynasty is almost built on the incompetency of the Clippers, what's worse, this one or the Brooklyn one?
So that's where it's tricky, right? Because I think at the end of the day, the biggest question about the OKC side of it is really going to come down to what they do moving forward, right? If they mess around and win another championship and they land in the top 5 and get another, top 5 pick to add to it, something that, a few seasons ago they were able to get Chet Holmgren, and we've seen how he's been able to, really assimilate to this Oklahoma City development system. I mean, he's arguably the front runner for DPOY right now, right? So the last time they got a top 5 pick, they got a DPOY candidate out of it. So
Yeah.
Lord only knows if they can get a Cam Boozer, an AJ DeBonsa, a Darren Peterson if he's healthy. Because right now, a lot of draft stock is, still high on him, but he hasn't played in quite some time. But even like a Nate Ahmed and some of those other guys who are still, heavily favored within this draft class. It's very top heavy in terms of the names, but there's a lot of talent in this 2026 class. And, the Clippers, they're not even they might be the worst of it all just based off of what their record is and the lack of protections and stuff. But this Oklahoma City Thunder team actually has 3 picks in the lottery because of the Utah Jazz and
Yeah.
the Charlotte Hornets as well, I believe. So, like, this Oklahoma City Thunder team was doing damage this upcoming draft cycle, kind of regardless of what the Clippers do,
Yeah.
which is why I think a lot of people never really prepared themselves for this doomsday scenario, right? The thing that makes the Brooklyn Nets one worse to me is because you just knew it didn't make sense, bro. KG was old, Paul Pierce was old,
Jason
Jason Terry
Terry.
was old. Like everybody was older and advanced. And you know what's so funny? They built the first unction. They built the first unction.
Hey, they had Joe
Because if you
Johnson at
look
the time
back,
too, bro. They still had Joe Johnson at the time as well.
yeah, man, Joe Johnson. Remember they still had broke back version of Darren Williams. Shout out to Darren Williams
Yeah,
at the peak
shout
of his
out to D
powers. He was
Will, yeah.
OD. But for that Brooklyn Nets team, he was absolutely buns, and he got even more buns when he ended up on the Cleveland Cavaliers. But that's not even the point.
Yeah.
But like, you just knew it didn't really make sense, and the picks from Brooklyn ended up turning into 2 All NBA caliber players. One that's always in the conversation for top 5 and the other that's at least always in the conversation for top 5 at his own position. And it just, at least for the Clippers pick, you can go back to that time frame and say that it felt like it kind of made sense for what they were trying to do in terms of competing. Because remember, storyline wise, also, they were trying to compete for relevance given that the Lakers, you know,
Brought in
the
LeBron,
Lakers
right?
had
Yeah.
LeBron James.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So you're competing for relevance. You get Steve Ballmer in the room, and you're like, this is a dude who has mad money and he wants to be relevant. He doesn't do anything, half-assed. At least it sounds like from a financial standpoint. And that meant that he was going to fully invest in this team as much as humanly possible. And it started with getting real star power in the room. And when you get a 2-for-1 deal where it's basically trade for Paul George and you automatically get Kawhi Leonard, most people would jump at that, especially given where Kawhi Leonard was at that point of his career,
Yeah.
literally coming off of an NBA championship, right? So at least all the signs for the LA Clippers trade made sense. Where the only thing that would stop you from doing it now is the 2020 hindsight of knowing that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is, a reigning MVP. Because other than that, draft picks are always hit or miss, and Danilo Gallinari just retired.
Yeah.
So besides Shea
Well,
Gilgeous-Alexander,
yeah.
yeah, besides Shea Gilgeous-Alexander blossoming into what he's become, everything else was just gambling on the Oklahoma City Thunder not landing on their picks. Little did they know the Oklahoma City Thunder are like one of the best drafting teams in the NBA. So yeah, I still think the Brooklyn Nets one is worse overall, just because you didn't even need hindsight to know that that was gonna hurt them in one way or another. I feel like,
Yeah.
because the only thing that would have made you think highly of that Brooklyn Nets team back then was just the name value of KG, Paul Pierce, Terry,
Jason
Jason
Terry.
Terry, Joe Johnson, and those guys all being on the same team. But realistically speaking, that team didn't seem like they were going to really be on anything, and they clearly deteriorated fast. This LA Clippers team had a 3 to 4 year window where we thought they were at least going to be a top 3 team in the Western Conference and push it for in the Western Conference Finals, like, for a good portion of time, and they just underachieved. So yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. I think that I think you're probably right with that. I mean, we knew that Brooklyn Nets thing was gonna be a disaster. This was like what, the late '30s, Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett at this point. Like they were definitely on the downhill from there. This is like whatever was left of the remnants of the 2008 Celtics team as well. Like they gave away 2 picks, and I think that trade really did a whole reset on the NBA where it's like, okay, we are not trading picks that far down the line because we know what can happen. A la the Brooklyn Nets giving up basically Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown. But the only way I play devil's advocate here, and this is the only thing I will say for this, is that the Clippers knew the risk of this, and all the other teams knew the risk of this after the fact. That trading this many pick down the line is going to um it's a huge risk nonetheless because you cannot predict what happens in 6 and 7 years. But they did that. But then they also gave up in that trade the prospect being one of the best players of this generation. A draft pick, and Jay, this is how the draft picks turned out. So you got the 2021 pick, which was Trey Mann, the 2022 unprotected first round pick, Jalen Williams, the 2023 swap, not conveyed, 2024 unprotected pick, which went to Miami, I think which turned out to be Jaime Jaquez. You have, and then now you have the 2026 pick, which is a top 5 protected pick. Sorry, which is an unprotected pick. You give up all that, even with the fact that yes, Paul George is his prime and everything, but they're gonna do their own way reason of the Brooklyn Nets, where they're gonna have to reset the trade market because now seeing how the Clippers lost out on that trade, these packages you see that's gonna be like 5 first round picks, 5 pick swaps, Jay, these are not gonna happen anymore. These type of trades are not going to happen anymore because people are going to be too scared for the result that may happen. That's why I feel like when people are making these trades for the Trae Youngs, the John Morants, all these guys, where and a couple years back, people were like, oh, I would trade 3 to 4 first round picks. Oh, we saw Rudy Gobert go for 3 to 4 first round picks. That stuff's not going to happen anymore because we've seen the effects of it from the Clippers side. So yes, I do agree with you that the Brooklyn Nets trade is probably bad because, again, I think people did kind of foresee that it was going to be bad nonetheless. But the Clippers are kind of rewriting their own narrative in terms of the trade market in a sense where now teams are going to be like, oh yeah, no, we're not going to. There's no way we're mortgaging that much of our future for any star, at this point. Like, it's just like a complete different change in the market, and I think the Clippers kind of did it in their own way. But man, I think you got to put it at least in bottom 5 because the way things ended up for the Thunder and the way that their dynasty is looking, you can contribute a whole lot to the Clippers' incompetency. But yeah, like it was pretty bad there, man. Like it's gonna be, it. I don't know. I feel like the Clippers think it's still gonna be like bottom 5. I don't know if there's anything else you want to say about this topic.
Sorry, bro. That was one of those where I didn't get to see like your mannerism because like I can barely see.
No,
My
I was
fault.
gonna say pack my
I didn't
prospects.
realize you were done. That's
Yeah,
my fault. That's
yeah.
my that's my bad.
No worries.
But Yeah, no, I mean they're in a really tough spot, bro. Overall, they're just I just believe that this LA Clippers team, they're never gonna get it right. They're never gonna know how to fix it. They're never gonna position themselves to be able to walk back trades like that one, right? You can't get those draft picks back. The value that you're gonna see over the time, like imagine, like I don't know if this will ever amount to Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, but knowing that your picks could become Jalen Williams and like let's use like they compare AJ DeBonta to Jason Tatum, but also they compare Darren Peterson to Anthony Edwards. Like
Yeah.
imagine a world where like two of your picks that you gave away are Jalen Williams, who nearly won Finals MVP last year, and Darren Peterson, who, despite not having nearly as much of the hype as an AJ DeBonta, is compared to one of the top, if not the top two guard in the NBA when healthy. And that's on the Oklahoma City Thunder, who won a championship. Mind you, they've been doing this through essentially a farm system and have been building this roster out through guys like Kaysen Wallace and Aaron Wiggins and AJ Mitchell, right? You go down that list. They've been doing this through a farm developmental system. You have as the Clippers have been throwing bag after bag at whoever will come to your franchise. And it hasn't done a thing. It hasn't led to anything besides your best outing being, I believe they made the Western Conference Finals once and Kawhi Leonard was injured.
Yes. Yes, yes, that was the case.
So your best shot at even making an NBA Finals, you weren't even fully together.
Yeah. And
And
the one
every
time,
other time that
yeah, I was
you
gonna
you
say
were
the one time they were fully
underwhelming.
together, and the one time they were fully together, they blew a 3-1 lead. Like, yeah,
Like that's
that's
the thing, man. That's the tough part. There's a world where the question about whether or not the LA Clippers trade versus the Brooklyn Nets trade is worse to me is going to come down to just what the Oklahoma City Thunder are able to do because that's what the measuring stick is, right? Like the biggest thing about the Boston Celtics thing is yes, they got Jason Tatum and Jalen Brown, but it didn't come into fruition beyond that until many years later. This LA Clippers thing happened a lot sooner as far as the Oklahoma City Thunder making the most of the situation, right?
yeah.
Because that trade happened in what, 2020?
2019,
2019?
2019, yeah,
2019 going into the 2020 season, right?
yeah,
We're in 2025. We're in the 2025-26 season. They won a championship last year. So that whole thing turned around in essentially 4 years.
yes,
Jason Tatum's been in the league for like what, like 8 seasons or something like that?
yeah, exactly.
Like, and they won a championship a few years ago, and that trade was I mean,
2014, 2015, something like that. Yeah,
yeah, like so yeah, it's been what's it called? They won a championship what was that, 2 seasons ago.
yeah,
So it took them a little longer to get a championship. And mind you, they had to do it with a more veteran led roster, bringing in Drew Holiday, having Derek White, having Al Horford. This Oklahoma City Thunder team is young and here to stay for a good little minute. All of their main guys are locked up long term, and all the other guys are on rookie scale contracts for the most part.
yeah, yeah. No,
Like this whole thing, oh man.
yeah. I think it's a type of dynasty that they might build, which could make the argument for it being worse as well. I 100% agree with you. I guess my only last point on this before we move on to the NBA stock market is Sam Presti has done this to a bunch of GMs, so I will say at least you're not the only one. That's I guess that's the last thing I'm gonna say. At least if you're the Clippers, you're just the one of many teams that fell for this for the Sam Presti charm, and now a bunch of teams have built up this OKC Thunder franchise, which looks like this farm system is not going to stop. So yeah, is it bad? Yes, but it's a lot of other contributing factors too. But yeah, this Thunder dynasty is looking even better and better day by day. So yeah, this is tough. Let us know down below what you guys think. Which trade was worse, the Clippers trade for Paul George or the Unction trade for the Brooklyn Nets? Now we'll get more revisionist history. there's still more can happen with this Clippers trade too. So it's just going to continue to grow this whole trade tree. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see how that plays out. Batman. We're going to move on to the next topic, and it is the NBA stock market. We are a quarter into the season. Jay, we finally hit our first quarter of the NBA season, and we're going to try and gauge the market in the NBA right now. Some guys already have their stock values very high right now. Some guys are having pretty low. Some guys are kind of middling in the middle, so maybe you might want to hold on some of that stock. But we're going to go answer a few questions for the start of for the first quarter of the season and see how these stocks, how we view these stocks going forward. And Jay, here is my first question: which player / team are you buying low on? And what I mean by this, to give context to the viewers today, is a player or team that's maybe not having the best start to the season, maybe having a slow start, but you think that they're going to be able to bounce back. Their values is pretty low right now, but you're willing to invest to think that, okay, this stock is going to continue to rise up. Which player / team is that for you, Jay?
So the player for me, I wouldn't necessarily say that he started slow, but I think his circumstances are one that I think is going to change very soon. And that for me is going to be Ryan Nembhard for the Dallas Mavericks. He's currently signed to a two-way for the Dallas Mavericks, and for a team that desperately is looking for some kind of spark of positivity next to Cooper Flag, that man needs a contract. Like ASAP. This is a guy who has been playing, I'm going to say, out of his mind as of late, and has really been able to show his ability to score the basketball as of the last couple of games. And he's positioned himself in a way where I think that even though he's an undersized guard, he has some real upside to his game. He plays with a certain level of tempo. And don't get me wrong, you got a couple of people already making these weird analogies where they're making Cooper Flag and Ryan Nembhard look like the next Luka Doncic and a Jalen Brunson. And I feel like that might be a little hyperbolic. We're going to leave that one alone. But what I do know is that dude can ball. Anthony Davis, and granted, we're not going to sit here and make it seem like AD's word means bond because he might mess around and not even be on this roster by the end of February. But for what it's worth, he even said, I don't have any, it's above my pay grade to like have any say in this. But if I had, my say in the whole thing, Ryan Nembhard is gonna have, would have, a fully guaranteed contract as far as like, having a full roster spot on this team. And I mean, he's definitely played like he deserves it. He's somebody that I think, if I'm being honest with you, I mean, he's not going to be this insane difference maker overall. Like, I still think that the Dallas Mavericks are going to like struggle this season just off of the mere fact that I don't know what their identity is at the moment. But on the other end of the spectrum, I just believe that like he is a real contributing point guard, and he's somebody that I think fits well next to what Cooper Flag does well. And I think that's something where, like, again, he started the season out so far as a two-way player, and I think that the buying low aspect of it is like there's no, in my personal opinion, I don't know if this is considered a bold prediction attached to it or not, but in my personal opinion, there's no way that Ryan Nembhard doesn't get, a guaranteed roster spot on this
I know
team.
what you mean.
Personally, I would even go as far as doubling down on it by saying he should have a fully guaranteed roster spot by the start of 2026. That if he continues to play the way he's playing.
Oh no, 100%. We've seen this with a couple of guys throughout the years. When you think of Vince Williams with the Memphis Grizzlies. You remember when he came onto the scene as a two-way guy and just completely was like a really good role player for them? And he signed to a 4-year deal. We seen it with Lou Dort back in the day, if you want to go to the higher end of this, where he was on a two-way deal, and you're like, oh wait, this guy could actually be one of the best defending guards in the league. We should probably sign him up to one of the most bargain value contracts in the NBA, which the Thunder ended up doing. Another one of those moments where the Thunder, good scouting over there on trying to get Lou Dort. To maybe a smaller extent, and this is coming from a Raptor fan. Last year, Jameson Battle was going through the same thing. As a two-way guy, turned out to be one of the best shooters on a team that really desperately needed shooting. We said we ended up signing him to a 4-year deal. And now is this kind of the same for Ryan Nembhard, where if you think of the Dallas Mavericks system, and especially without Kyrie Irving in it at the moment, they don't really have a true point guard. I mean, like, we've been complaining about the fact that Cooper Flagg's been playing point guard for the last 2 months at this point, Jay. And Ryan Nembhard, at this point, It's probably their 1-2 point guard when you have a Brandon Williams on the roster, a D'Angelo Russell, trying to figure out who's going to be the lead guard for this team. Ryan Nembhard in the pre-draft process was deemed to be one of the best playmakers in the NBA draft. He was deemed to be one of the more mature players who's like a ready now type player. But the thing is, those other guys either get drafted in the second round or end up going undrafted. He got picked up he got picked up by the Dallas Mavericks, and with the circumstances that they have right now, Ryan Nembhard's probably the best option when it comes to playmaking, setting up his team. And that, more than anything, is what Cooper Flagg needs right now. When you have someone like Cooper Flagg, like Anthony Davis, these are the guys that need someone to feed him the ball, get him into their spots. And Ryan Nembhard is probably the best on the team at that right now. So I agree with you, Jay. I think like his stock is low right now, mostly because not a lot of people know him. He's had like a 28-point game in a win versus the Denver Nuggets the other night, and then also had a 17-point game 3 games ago. This stock is only going to go up. So if you're going to invest, like Jay mentioned, do it right now. I'm actually like on board with this. I think like yeah, it's definitely a different way I was going about the buying low thing, but that's definitely a good way of putting it.
Yeah, I think that he's an interesting play. If I had to go somebody that's a little bit more like to what you were talking about rough season start, but like to buy on, just as a quick answer, Cam Johnson. I think that the three ball is coming back slowly but surely. That's what they brought him in to be. I recently saw a podcast on the Young Man in the Three with him and Aaron Gordon, and he was just like, "Be yourself," and like we're gonna be the ones standing out on the podium at the end of all this, basically, right?
Yeah.
And I think that Cam, I think as he continues to get more um assimilated with the roster and he kind of continues to figure out like where he fits in the grand scheme of how they play over in Denver, like I think that he's going to be somebody that like has one of those Cam's going to be one of those guys that I'm not saying he's going to like have like a Kobe White or a Jalen Green jump post All-Star weekend because we've seen that in the past. But he's going to be a guy that I think by like post All-Star weekend, that three-point stroke for Cam Johnson is going to really start to come back to fruition, and that's going to make the Denver Nuggets so potent because that's going to help them in making that last push towards the seeding in the playoffs. So he's probably the name I would pick as far as like a guy who's had a little bit of a slow start for what he brings to the table, but I think by like season's end he's going to be back to his 38% three-point shooting self, and we're going to be like, yo, the Nuggets are going to be a problem in a 7-game series.
Yeah, I know. Again, I 100% agree with you. You know how much I love that Cam Johnson trade for the Denver Nuggets. I think it's more of a thing where it's a completely different system than he's played with, whether it's the Phoenix Suns, whether it's the Brooklyn Nets, and now you're put in a situation where Denver where everyone's playing off of Nikola Jokic, and it's trying to find your own spots, and I think that's what he's currently doing right now. So in terms of like early slow starts to the season, it's kind of expected when someone playing with such gravity of Nikola Jokic. Maybe some people might think, oh, it's gonna be easy right away because he's gonna find you in your spots. At the end of the day, like this, you're 21 games into it with a team, and you've played in like two completely different situations prior to that. It's gonna be a transition nonetheless. So it's just going to take a bit more time, and I 100% agree with you. Like, once you get, past the All-Star break, and once you get, off maybe more than half a season with this team, I think Cam Johnson is going to go back to being one of those elite role players, one of those elite fourth or fifth options on a team, and I think he's going to become such a big deal, such a huge factor on this team, especially when it comes to the playoffs. So, yeah, that's definitely one to definitely look at. Jay, for my guy that I'm kind of buying low stock on right now, is someone who was getting probably a lot of love from his own fan base, from guys outside here, to the point where this guy even made an all defensive team last year. We both were very happy that he did. But he's kind of having a slow start to the season, especially on the defensive end, which is very strange coming from him. Jay, I'm gonna buy low on Tumani Kamara right now. Because Tumani Kamara is off to a slow start this year. People are gonna think, TV, he's averaging 12 points a game. This is the career high in points this year. He's shooting like 40% from the field. 34% from three, and his defense has fallen off a cliff, Jay, to start off the season here for Tumani Kamara. And it's gone to the point where if you ask some Blazer fans, if you see like some of their subreddits, if you see like kind of their reaction to how his start of the season has gone, you can see that they are even potentially preferring a Chris Murray to start over him at this point because he has just been kind of laboring out there as someone who really was a you could play me anywhere in this lineup and I'll give you exactly what you need, which is the defensive on an all defensive level, and I'll be able to hit threes, which he was able to show last year. Now it feels like when I watch Tumani Kamara play, and again, he was one of my favorite players to watch last year. So seeing him take this dip in his game kind of hurts because I really wanted him to take that next jump this year. But watching him play, and I think it's starting to get better when I watched the Toronto Raptor game live yesterday against the Portland Trail Blazers. It gave me a little bit of hope that he could start getting back into this. But he's really letting his offense dictate his defense right now. And he's kind of forgetting, or maybe like that's affecting him to the point where he needs to kind of realize in himself what got him to the dance. I think we kind of like
Yeah,
we use that phrase a lot. Like sometimes you like get like too ahead of trying to like fix one part of your game that you forgot what makes you great. And I think
yeah.
what's happening with Tumani Kamara is like, man, I'm not able to shoot the ball well. What happened to my 3 point shot that I was hitting last year? And I think that's affecting his defensive game, which is his calling card, why he made all defensive team last year. I think as the season progresses, once he realizes, okay, I'm going to let my defense fuel my offense, as we've seen with players like a Scotty Barnes this year, as we've seen with some other players in the league. Bam Adebayo too, who's becoming a all defensive guy once again, and his offensive game is benefiting because of it. I think Tamari Kamara, as the season progresses, is going to continue to realize that, saying, "Okay, I'm putting myself too much on the offensive end. I shouldn't be trying to look for
Yeah.
my shot here and trying to get the 3 point shot going. Let me lock in defensively. This is what I was great at. This is why I become what some people might have looked at as a near untradeable piece here on Portland last year.
Yeah.
And that eventually, then my offensive game will come back because I'm going to get that confidence in the defensive end. So right now, the Tumani Kamara stock is down, which is completely like a shift from last year. I think I'm going to buy low on it now, and I think he's going to start to bounce back.
I mean, I think that's a really good point. I think the other thing is when you talk about the idea of the whole like focus on what brought you to the dance, not just what brought you to the dance in terms of people recognizing you in the media, but brought you to the dance in terms of what got you that contract extension this
Yes,
summer, right?
exactly.
Like at the end of the day, the most important thing for Tumani is to be that tone setter as a both a rim defender at his position because he's one of the best, shot contesters in the NBA, at least when he was playing, really well last season. But on top of that, one of the most dangerous on-ball defenders in the NBA. And he also needs to remember that the offensive load he's trying to expand, I'm not going to say it's unnecessary, but look to your left. And if you realize on that same depth chart, you're having a guy who's having an offensive explosion of a breakout year in Deni Avdija, who's already taking on that mantle of having, more of an offensive role on this team than he's had in seasons past or even on other teams. So the biggest thing is Tumani, look at Denny, look at Shaden, Jeremy. Like they have guys who can score. When this team was one of the more dangerous teams in the league earlier on in the season, when the season first started, it was based off of the fact that their pace of play was insane and they were able to really contend with folks on the defensive end. Since then, things have kind of slowed down and it's really brought them down to earth a significant amount. And I think I'm not going to say it starts with Tumani, but he's a big part of what the regression looks like for this team over the last couple of weeks. So I feel like it can go a long way by him kind of getting back on his high horse. I don't blame you for buying low on him right now because he's an interesting name. He's also somebody that I think that if the Trailblazers have really any aspirations of at least being in this play-in mix and stuff like that, and it's very feasible with the bottom of the West is atrocious right now. It feels like, but
Yeah,
if they
yeah,
want to
9 and below,
really,
yeah, for sure, he'd have a chance.
yeah, but if you want to be in the mix, for that, guys like Tumani are gonna have to, reestablish themselves. And yeah. I want to watch some Tumani Kamara like defensive possessions to kind of really get into the weeds of it. I'm not gonna sit here and act like I've been really locked in on Trailblazers basketball as of late,
Yeah.
because outside of Denny, I haven't been paying a ton of attention. But I can also say on that same front that Tumani is somebody that as far as importance goes, I think you can make the argument maybe like the third most important player
Yes.
on that
Yeah,
team
yeah.
right now. You can make a really good argument for that.
Yeah, and I think that's what again, his value is on the defensive end. And like when you look at the idea of him being the third most important player, it's not because he's a knockdown shooter. It's not because he's able to be this offensive engine or being like, a great off ball guy. It's the fact that he is one of the best defending wings in the league. And we seen that last year. So we know that he's able to tap into it. And it's not like he had some injury where it's like, okay, maybe there's something we have to look out for. He has an ability, but these are just kind of the ebbs and flows you go as a young player because you're gonna have these like moments where you're not gonna be able to hit your shot, but you're gonna need that other skill to still be strong there. And we've seen that a lot in like, for example, Draymond Green's career, where at times you can see that the offensive game kind of affected the defensive game too. But Tamani is still early on in his career. I think still early on in the season, and like you mentioned, 9 and 10 in the Western Conference right now is such a crapshoot because one good winning streak can really get you into that 9-10 position. People want to count on the Clippers. If you go on a 5 game winning like a 3-4 game winning streak, you're back in that 9-10 position, so you still have a chance. The Blazers could really like establish themselves as a team in the play and mix with another 2 to 3 game winning streak. So I don't think it'll take too much to turn around. But once again, with Tumani Kamara, I know you want to improve your offensive game, and I think that's going to be a big point for him going forward as being like, one of the most valuable like role players in the league. But you gotta still be elite at that one end, which got you the contract like you mentioned. And as long as that continues to go, I think that's gonna when the offensive game bounces back. So again, buying stock on Tumani Kamara right now. He's still one of my favorite guys to watch in the league. I'm just hoping he's able to bounce back.
Yeah. Trailblazers should be a good watch. Like I said, at the end of the day, I mean, it feels pretty comfortable. That 9 to 10 spot is pretty up to for grabs. Question is just going to be who goes out and shows for it. I think with the Kings fire sale, the Clippers falling apart, the Pelicans falling apart. Utah sounds like they want to build around Laurie Markkinen. I don't even know what that means. to be quite frankly, to be quite frank, I have no idea what that even means, and I don't know if this Dallas Mavericks thing with AD more
So
so than
weird.
anything could be a great determining factor as to what their plans are. So everything points to the Trailblazers being within that top 10 for at least a chance at a playoff spot. The question is just like where they're going to land, right? More than anything. So
Yeah.
they're in a good position to at least be able to play, meaningful basketball as far as like a play-in tournament game is concerned. But anything beyond that's going to rely on guys like Tumani Kamara getting back to the guy that we saw last season.
100%. Jay, next question for you. Which player/team are you selling high on? So, again, context for the viewers. This is a player or team that's off to a really strong start, or someone who has like a really high stock right now. Maybe they're having like a fire start to the season, but you'd be the one to maybe sell high on them because you think they might, regress back to the mean, or maybe start to take a little bit of a dip as the season goes on. Jay, which player or team is that for you?
Yeah, so that one's a little trickier because I think some of the guys that are playing well are, you know, doing a pretty good job of like instilling the confidence in me to believe that they're going to stick with it. But the guy who's getting a whole lot of hype right now that I'm just like, okay, cool. He's hooping, don't get me wrong, but like, I don't know based off of his archetype whether or not this is something that'll stick. I'm just not buying the Dylan Brooks hype. I'm not gonna lie to you. Like, I don't
Oh,
know how I feel about that. Yes, him being a secondary scorer for this team, especially with Jalen Green out, has been a really big boost for this team. And they're getting help from Colin Gillespie and Grayson Allen shooting the ball really well too. But now Devin Booker's about to miss time, and I just wonder, you know, I just wonder what that looks like. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
Dylan Brooks' number one option just sounds nasty, in my personal opinion. You know what I mean?
This
Maybe,
is gonna
maybe,
be
maybe
some
some of you don't.
interesting ball. This is about to be
Yeah, maybe
some
maybe
weird.
some others disagree, but me personally, my brand of basketball that I'm a fan of doesn't seem like it would start with Dylan Brooks isolation jumper. Something about that just doesn't roll off the way I would hope. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
as much as I like what Dylan Brooks has been able to bring to the table so far this season, I don't want to discount what he's doing by any means because he is hooping, right? He is playing really well. Let me bring up his split so that Yeah, 22 points, 3 rebounds, just barely under 2 assists per game. But he's shooting 46% from the field, 32% from three. And I think that's the thing that kind of sends the message to me that I think this kind of play is gonna regress soon, is because that three ball already is struggling, and he's taking a career high 7.6, nearly 8 attempts from beyond the arc right now. Like his attempts from beyond the arc are literally nearly as much as some of his most recent seasons in Houston, the amount of shots he got in total in Houston. In Houston, he was averaging about, what's that? About 11 shot attempts per game. Again, he's averaging nearly 8 3-point attempts per game with the Phoenix Suns. I just don't know if realistically, and I think this stretch during, this time frame without Devin Booker is going to kind of exploit that to a certain extent. I just do not think that he's about to mess around and average 20 points a game for this team. And I'm high on Phoenix. You remember before the
Yeah,
season started, I said there's no way this team doesn't smash the over on 35 wins. And maybe one of those ways is missing time with Jalen Green and Devin Booker. Maybe that's one easy way to mess around and miss the over on that. But as high as I am on the Phoenix Suns as a team and some of the players that they have that are hooping right now, Dylan Brooks being this right now was never on the bingo card of things that I thought was going to lead to them, hitting the over on that. So I don't think what he's going to do is going to be sustainable.
I
And I
feel
think the hype around him right now is just, a wave that he's going to ride for a little while and then it's going to calm down. But I
yeah,
mean, he did drop 33 the other night. So
he did. He did. I mean, this is a career high in points, career high in attempts, but also his lowest 3-point percentage since the 2021-22 season. Funnily enough, the last time he had his career high in like his career high points average. So when he's a high volume shooter, the efficiency is going to go down a little bit for Dylan Brooks, and I think that's going to be more of the same when we look into this next week without Devin Booker, who they just announced because of a groin injury he will be out for a week. So Dylan Brooks number one option, getting 22, 23 shots per game doesn't sound great. Especially when I think the big outlook for this Phoenix Suns team is you're gonna see them succeed with the backcourt of Devin Booker and Jalen Green. Dylan Brooks being the third option, being that the defensive menace, being that vocal leader of the team like he was for the Memphis Grizzlies, is going to be the key to success and ultimately what his real value is there on the Phoenix Suns. Him being this 22-point per game scorer is not going to be the reason, or is not going to be kind of the sustainable action that's going to make this Phoenix Suns team great, as Jay has honestly predicted since the beginning of the season. So, yes, is there going to be a regression? Probably. So, in terms of him being this like output 22-point per game scorer, yeah, I don't think it's going to get much better than this. And honestly, with the next week or so, getting even more of these attempts, it might look a bit lower. But who knows? He might prove us wrong. But we're going to have to wait and see. Dylan Brooks is definitely an interesting one here. Funnily enough for me, Jay, I have another three-man that I was gonna talk about here, but I'm gonna be going over to the east side. I'm selling
hmm.
my stock high on Michael Porter Jr. right now.
That's a good one. That's a good
Michael
one.
Porter Jr. And look, I'm not trying to discount. Firstly, 24, 25 points per game, basically, which is a career high compared to his sophomore season where he scored 19. 3 assists per game, career high. 7.4 rebounds, career high. And also 38% from the 3-point line, so he's still pretty consistent there. And also 49% from the field. I'm not saying that he is good, because he's always been a consistent 3-point shooter, consistent guy from the field his entire career, right? But the reason I say sell high stock on him, one, it's the Brooklyn Nets. How can you really take too much stake in the Brooklyn Nets, even though Michael Porter Jr. has been great? But two,
Facts.
if I'm the Brooklyn Nets and I hear any sort of offer for one or for 2 first round picks, I am accepting that deal immediately for Michael Porter Jr. Because as much as he has been great, honestly, become more positive value in that Cam Johnson trade, and just see how it works, to see how it goes. He's upped his value to the point where he might garner 2 second round picks of 2 first round picks because he's such an offensive player since he's been such a good offensive player this year. And the thing is, people are thinking, oh, is he just dribble shooting? No, that's not how Michael Porter Jr. is. Yes, he's Michael Never Swing the Rock Porter Jr., but he's the type of guy who will catch the ball and shoot over traffic. He's not the guy who's going to be dribbling the ball out, dribbling the air out the ball, driving to the rim. He's the guy who makes quick decisions. He's the guy who, according to stats, has held the ball through 2.7 seconds per possession. So he doesn't even hold the ball that much compared to someone like a Cam Thompson who gets most of his offense that way. So people
Hmm.
will still look at this, and maybe we'll look at a team like the Golden State Warriors, for example, and think, okay, we need some offensive punch. We need some help at the three position. We might go all in on Michael Porter Jr. because of how great his season has been. If a team like Golden State or some other team offers you 2 first-round picks for Michael Porter Jr., I say take it. I think that's good value ultimately for the Cam Johnson trade, and that's ultimately what the direction you want to go if you're the Brooklyn Nets. So as much as great he's been, I think he's done a really good job playing up his trade value, and I think along with the many other names that are going to be on the trade block this year, he could be a guy where you're like, even as a Brooklyn Nets, you would say, you know what, let's try and sell high on this dude right now because he's playing the best basketball of his career. I don't know if he's going to be able to maintain this. Obviously, we know about his injury history as well. It might be time to sell high, especially with the peak that we've seen Michael Porter Jr. I don't know if he's going to be able to sustain this for the full regular season.
Yeah, I mean the reality of the situation is, like you said before, like the truth of the matter is, if you get, I mean, realistically, if you either get a strong first round pick as one first round pick and a young player, or you're able to get multiple firsts for him, like you said, you just do it in a heartbeat, like, and you don't think twice about it, right? And it's because the value that you get out of him this season is not one that you can guarantee is duplicable, right? Like, for example, a perfect guy that I think you can use in similarity to this, and he has a little bit more stature in the NBA, but he's somebody that I think when you talk about trade value is very similar to this, is Lauri Markkanen. Lauri Markkanen, when he made that All-Star game, we thought like, oh, if Utah was gonna bag out at any time, right now, right now, as he's coming off of the season where he makes the All-Star game, he looks like an absolute hooper. He's playing the 3 and the 4 for you, and he's balling, right? Then he deals with the knick-knack injury issues and things like that, and you hear his name a little less, or you hear his name, but the price is a little wonky.
Exactly. Yeah.
And as we've gotten further away from that All-Star season, we now hear the tone in Utah changing about even how they view him. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I'm like, now there are reports that say they want to build around
Yeah.
Laurie. And that's the PR way of saying we ran out of options, so we'd rather use him as the pillar. Or that's the PR way of trying to boost his trade stock by saying we still think that he can be a number one slash number two guy on a championship caliber roster. We just need to put the pieces around him. Both are wrong. Well, not necessarily that he can't be a number two guy. I do think he's capable of that. But the idea of building around him is very interesting and a very bad approach to trying to boost his trade value, because at the end of the day, your best window to maximize his trade value, you missed. You missed because you were trying to overprice what that
And,
return should look like,
and Jay,
right?
and dare I say, he's been kind of building it back up now as being a near 30 point per game scorer. So again,
Yeah.
it's the same thing with Michael Porter Jr., where it's like maybe it's the best time now because he is able to rebuild it, and you don't know how much he's being able to maintain this as well.
And that's the tough part about it, right? That's the thing is the constant yo-yoing back and forth for somebody like Laurie Markkinen should send you even more mixed signals about Michael Porter Jr. Because, like, do we think Michael Porter Jr. is going to make the All-Star team this year? Because, like, I think even with how well he's playing, I still don't think he's going to make the All-Star game.
If the season ended today, I would say he is an all star. If he can maintain this to the All Star break, again, that's a whole other conversation. If he can maintain this,
And that's totally fair too.
yeah.
But I think but then the conversation presides. Do you think he's going to do it again? And then that goes to ask you the same Laurie Marketing question of, if you're going to sell as high as you possibly can, if Michael Porter Jr. does make the All-Star game this season, that's exactly why you have to move him. Because you don't know when you're going to see that ever again. Andrew Wiggins made the All-Star game because of a K-pop idol. Do we forget that? Like, we've had some really interesting All-Star names in the past, and they end up being one-shot All-Stars. So if you have the chance, as the Brooklyn Nets, mind you, very irrelevant this year for 1,000,001 different reasons.
Yes.
If you somehow in the midst of that sneak in an all-star in Michael Porter Jr. this year and you don't move him as soon as humanly possible with the value he's going to have attached to that, I don't know what the Nets are doing at that point. I don't think they're as invested in the rebuild as they think they are, if that's how they go about it.
Yeah,
Simple as that.
yeah. Honestly, I think that last point is exactly why I think yes, this is the time to sell high on him. Whether you're an NBA fan or at this point if you're the Brooklyn Nets, because if you're really committed to this rebuild and you really want to start getting more young talent in the door, yes, Michael Porter Jr. I'm not saying that he's like some sort of unk out there. He's still a pretty young dude, but
Uh,
these are the type of performances that you're looking at and being like, yes, this is the type of thing that we want to see from our older players, or in quotations, older players, so that we are able to flip them for other assets. So being able to take advantage of this at its very most is not thinking, yes, this is who we want to be leading our team into the future. No, no, no. This is the type of player and the type of moment that he's having right now is the one where you want to be like, okay, now we can flip him for more assets and we can continue to hone in on this rebuild. Because
yeah,
whatever pick they get this year, which looks like it's going to be another top 5 pick, let's be completely honest, they're probably going to be the number one guy going forward. Whether I think we mentioned AJ DeBonta, Darren Peterson, Cam Boozer, whatever. Like this is like number
right.
one written all over whoever you end up drafting with this next pick. Michael Porter Jr. will not be fitting. will not be the guy that you want to be building next to them.
Ooh.
So, like I think, and how we're both reiterating this, we just think this is the best time to do it. And I think as kind of adjacent to the Corey Markkinen situation, both teams should be able to do it because you're both in that same scenario. One East, one West, obviously, but both teams are on course to be going for that top 5 in the draft in what could be the best draft class. Professionals or analysts are saying that's been the best in years. Commit to that.
Yeah.
And you have guys here who can now bring in more assets to help this team going over in the future. There's plenty of teams there who are thinking that they're one piece away, who are going to be willing to trade potentially one or multiple first round picks for these two guys. And I think you take advantage of that instead of holding on to them.
Yeah. You definitely have to, bro. Especially given the fact that, if there was any indication that the Brooklyn Nets are setting themselves up for a very particular way of moving forward, use the Cam Thomas off season as a representation. If anybody on that team coming into the year was considered a blue chip guy for them, it would have been Cam Thomas. And they haggled with him and he ended up signing the qualifying offer. If that's not an indication to you that they have a completely different route in mind as far as how they plan on building this franchise moving forward, I don't know what is. So the minute you even remotely see things where Michael Porter Jr. could be of significant value, or honestly positive value in general, but definitely if you mess around and get 2 firsts from Michael Porter Jr., I mean you have to run him to the airport. You have to.
Yes.
Because you just don't know when something like that's gonna occur again.
Yeah, so I think we're both on the same page. This is the type of thing where you have to sell high on someone who's probably at the highest value of his whole career so far. So you
Yeah.
gotta take advantage of it now. Jay, final question for the NBA stock market. We've seen stocks that are low right now that you potentially want to buy on. We've seen stocks that you're super high on that you potentially want to sell. Now let's kind of go into those weird stocks, Jay. Which player or team are you kind of holding right now? You don't want to buy
Uh-huh.
low or sell high. You're kind of holding them and you're like, let's just see what happens a little bit longer so we can get a better idea of what we're looking at. Which player or team are you looking at in terms of that sort of idea?
So the team that I'm very in the middle about, and this is where I am gonna go to the Eastern Conference. The Cleveland Cavaliers are just very weird right now. And I don't necessarily know what to do. And they're quite literally in the middle of the pack. And that's part of the reason why I'm kind of standing pat. Because this feels like a team that talent wise just is better than the sixth seed in the East, right? They just feel like a team that is much better than that. The issue is that they're just not the same offense from a potent perspective as they were in years past. Specifically last season. And I know a lot of this has to do with the whole Darius Garland element, as it always does, it feels like. But I think the Darius Garland element is actually why I'm kind of sitting in the middle. Like, when he comes back, how much differently can this team be? Because I think defensively they still have everything there to be, one of the top four teams in the Eastern Conference. But offensively, it just feels like without that other primary ball handler on the perimeter to really rely on consistently, it's just so much of a wash. And so Darius Garland's inconsistency within the lineup, it's really hurting them getting to where they need to be at. Not to mention Jared Allen has been in and out of the lineup as well so far this season, right? So I think a lot of it is just that the Cleveland Cavaliers are dealing with a lot of injury situations in spots that they could really use help in. Like, even like, for example, Lonzo Ball has not been nearly as impactful as they would have hoped, in
Yes.
that exchange with sending Isaac Okoro to the Bulls. Like, don't get me wrong, was Isaac Okoro like this, this tide that raises ships? No. But Lonzo Ball hasn't really changed life significantly either in any way that makes that trade look like it was either better or worse. So there's just still I think the best way to summarize it is, for the Cleveland Cavaliers, Donovan Mitchell is still that dude. He is still that guy. Evan Mobley, to me, still looks like a top 3 to top 5 defender in basketball, top 3 to top 5 rim protector in basketball. The question is everything else. The question is the offense around everything else. The question is the health factor for this team. Like, those things need to be answered in order for me to kind of really like buy into this team moving forward. But I'm not giving up on them either, because I just felt like they need one or two things to start sliding in their favor, and all of a sudden we're talking about them as, having the third best record in the Eastern Conference. I think it can happen that quickly.
Oh, 100%. Funnily enough, Jay, I do have a backup contingency to this, but it was going to be the Cleveland Cavaliers for me as well, because they're such a weird team to look at, because you
Yeah.
know how good Donovan Mitchell is, and he's been averaging like 30 points per game. I think like if anything on that team has been consistent over these last 2 to 3 years, it has been Donovan Mitchell. But Evan Mobley, yes, he's still like one of the top rim protectors in the league. Still middling on that offensive end. We don't know like what he's gonna end up being, because we keep waiting for this jump. We keep waiting for this jump, but we haven't been able to see it. Darius Garland has still not been able to be healthy. That three position, which we thought maybe is like becoming consistent, still hasn't seen Max Strus play enough games. We still are seeing them throw in just a bunch of random dudes. I mean, shout out to what's my man's name? Naquan Tomlin, who's been a kind of godsend for them, because and then he's come
Son
out of
of Nick
freaking
Tomlin.
nowhere. Shout out to Naquan
Yeah.
Tomlin. Like, he's actually been pretty solid for them this year. But it's such a weird team. And the thing is, I had this team going to the NBA Finals. So my
Um,
stock and like my investment in this team was very high to start the year. Am I gonna be jumping ship at the moment as someone who's very high on this team in the beginning? No, because we're according to the season, and one of the biggest things I said why I think that there could still be a lot of promise with this team, and I think there's a chance to be a deep playoff run, is the fact that you have someone like a Darius Garland paired in with the rest of the lineup to make things work. We still haven't been able to see that, and even though it's looking less and less likely that it's going to be able to last throughout the playoffs. It feels like another one of those moments where it feels like the Cavs have wasted another moment, where especially in a less than loaded East right now, this is a
yeah.
perfect time to strike, and they haven't been able to do it. But I'm still holding my stock, and I am definitely there with you that there's still a lot of time for them to turn this thing around. But I can understand too why people want to jump off shift, because it's just looking like another repeat of seasons in the past where we had so much over this team. We think that this team has like the right way going forward. They have the roster to compete and do well, potentially be in the finals. But once again, they just continue to fall short of expectations. So I understand why people either want to buy low on this team, jump off the ship, but I'm kind of with you there too. Having a hold on them and just kind of waiting to see how things play out is probably where I'm at with them as well.
Yeah, yeah. They're definitely in a weird spot. And I think the biggest question is just going to be the Darius Garland element. But I also think, I think the Jared Allen thing means a lot too. Him being in and out of the lineup, I think we've always, or I'm not say always, but the last like year, I would say at least, the question about his ability to coexist with Evan Mobley has been a big question mark. But I think that we downplay just how impactful of a rim runner and shot blocker that Jared Allen is when you also factor in the lack of real perimeter defense that this team has on the roster, right? They have guys who in theory are supposed to be above average defenders on the perimeter, right? Lonzo Ball, DeAndre Hunter, right? Jordan Tyson to a lesser degree as well, right? But it just isn't playing out the way you would hope, again based off the personnel. It's just not playing out the way you would think. um and so I think that's something that if they don't right the ship on that very soon, I think that's going to be one of those things that makes them very vulnerable, because they're going to be a playoff team. That's not the question. The real question is, how does that hold up? And I think that's why I'm in the middle right now, is because I don't know where that holds up right now based off of how they're currently playing.
Yeah, no, there's just too many question marks for me to say I'm jumping off or I'm like fully invested in this team too. So yes, I'm definitely there with you. But because you did that, and I did have a backup plan, I did have another team I was going to talk about, and that team right now for me is the Memphis Grizzlies. They're right now 9-13, and after a horrendous start to the season, I think they're slowly but surely getting back to it. And a big part of that, Jay, has been the return of Zach Edey. Zach Edey has been a
That's a good one.
very impactful piece ever since he's come back from his injury. He started off the season, missing the first couple weeks, but as of late, Jay, he's had a 21-15 game against the New Orleans Pelicans. Absolutely dominated Sacramento in the 32-17 game, and also had a 19-15 game versus the San Antonio Spurs. And I think that was a big part that was missing, especially early on in the season. Just having a guy there who can stay in the middle of the paint, grab rebounds, and just be big for this Memphis Grizzlies team, who were very much relying on players such as Santi Aldama, a Jock Landale to fill in those roles. And let's be honest, they're not the type of players. And we know that Jaren Jackson is not that type of player too as well. So having Jack Edey back has been a godsend for them. The reason I'm holding on them, and I think I'm kind of like still on the belief in Memphis, but kind of, not fully invested because obviously we've seen how all things transpired so far this year. When John Morant comes back, I think, whether you like to believe this or not, I think that whole thing with Klay Thompson a few weeks ago was a bonding moment for that Grizzlies team in a bit of a way. Where after that whole mess of I'm not feeling the joy in this game anymore. He was going through his whole Jimmy Butler saga himself. I think
Yeah.
them fighting off the haters, them fighting off a lot of the critics that of their season so far, will bring them together, kind of like how they did in 21-22. I'm not saying they're going to be a playoff team. No, no, no. But I do want to see how this team plays out when John Morant does come back from his injury. Whether that is him playing his trade value up, and then we'll see what type of package they get back. And who knows, they still might be competitive. We mentioned how the 9 and 10 spot in the Western Conference is very much in the air, and I think the Grizzlies are within that mix. But I also think that if John Morant were to get his value up and they get some sort of young assets as well as some trade pieces, I still think there's enough talent on this team where I don't think they may make the playoffs, but they can still be some spoilers for this team. I think they could still be a little big, the slightest bit of noise out there in the West. Am I going to fully invest in it? No. Am I going to just say, if you have their stock, fully jump off ship? No. But I will see how things play out, because I see a vision for them going forward, especially with Zach Edey being back. Hopefully he can stay healthy. But I want to see what this team looks like now with a recovered John Morant, with a Zach Edey on the floor, with KCP slowly but surely getting back his 3-point shot over the last 5 games, having a good rookie in Cedric Coward. Jalen Wells finally getting back into his flow. This is a talented roster, Jay, and I just want to just kind of take a look at the field and see how things play out.
Yeah, I don't blame you on that one. And I think this is one of those situations where, like, I mean, all of this depends on how they want to play the rest of the season too, right? Because all the trade rumor aspects of it can leak into even further issues, right? Like Triple
Yeah,
J
yeah.
has to be a conversation if Ja Morant is moved, right? Like
And he just
if
re-signed a
that
contract too, by the way. His contract just kicked in this year, and he's like on a 5 year
and that's the
deal.
thing, but does that make him a negative asset or a positive one?
True, true.
Because you have to think because depending on what team that is that he's moved for, or excuse me, that he's moved to, him being signed long term with an already sealed contract might actually make him more valuable. See, John Morant, if you listen to a lot of the reports saying that John Morant, LaMelo Ball, and Trey Young, I saw something on Twitter actually during the podcast that was saying that like there's an NBA insider that views all three of those point guards as negative assets right now.
John Morant
So
posted about that on his story, by the way. If you haven't seen the story, man just posted a picture of him, Trey Young, and LaMelo Ball together, which I found pretty funny.
yeah, see, like it's like one of those things where like it'll be very interesting to see what it'll be really interesting to see what the play on even what a trade looks like for John Morant if that is truly the route that they decide to go. And I think that moot point is the one where it's like Zach Edey is a guy who I think can stick. He's a guy who I do think that when he's on the floor is as good of a rim protector as you can get for their team. And I think he still plays very well within their up tempo play style that they've leaned into. The question just is like, how much are they going to continue to play through him? And that's what the last 3 to 4 games or so has been like kind of like eye popping is like they're really giving him the rock and allowing him to operate in the low post at a pretty high rate for a guy who didn't show off much of an insane offensive bag last season, right? So I'm really interested to see what they do. Obviously, we're all a little bit more interested in what they do based off of what happens with John Morant. But I do think that whatever happens to John Morant will also bleed into how they do things like utilizing, someone like Zach Edey long term.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's just a very interesting team because as much as you want to say that the sky is falling down on the Grizzlies, it's not like, you know, firstly, they just got a bunch of first round picks for Desmond Bain. So, like, that's already kind of nice to know that they have, like, at least some assets going forward. So, whether they want to use those picks or if they want to use them as trade assets going forward, that's still a possibility. But
Uh,
they have a nice young team, too. It feels like we got ahead in Cedric Howard. I think both of us were on board with that. We thought that he was going to be a great pickup for them from the beginning. But I'm still intrigued with this team, Jay. And it's one of those where, with all the things going on, and the fact that it feels like John Morant's trade value is as low as ever, you want to see him play back with this healthy roster and just see
yeah,
where things go. And I'm just interested in seeing that. I just want to see John Morant back in accord with this team. Maybe he builds his
right.
trade value back up, or maybe again the stuff that's been happening the last few weeks with a lot of criticism towards him and the rest of these guys. Maybe it could be a wake up call to this Grizzlies team, who remember just 3 or 4 years ago was like one of the like best upcoming teams in the NBA. They still got a young roster and they still got a team with a lot of talent. I'm just interested in seeing how things do play out. But it all starts with John Morant coming back, so I'm gonna be keeping my eye on them for sure. Not buying low, not jumping off ship, but I'll view them. I'll view them. I'm gonna just kind of keep my eye on them going forward.
Totally fair. Totally fair. And gonna be a really interesting story to kind of keep tabs on because what they do is gonna really I think what they do with Ja is gonna tell us the whole rest of the story about what this team is really on. Because we haven't seen them. One thing that's really interesting about them, talk about Memphis, is that we haven't seen them have to hit an actual reset button in any real way. Right? Like the grit and grind Grizzlies to Ja Morant era happened
Smooth
almost very
transition.
seamless. Yeah,
Yes,
very
seamless.
seamlessly, right? So it's gonna be really interesting to see how they play this just off of that um alone because it just feels like there's a real chance here where like they could actually hit the full reset button. And if they do decide to do that, you know, who is their leader in the midst of all of that? Do they lean on Triple J to be the face again, kind of that group, or does like Zach Edey and Jalen Wells and Cedric Coward is like that the route you're gonna go, right? So it's gonna be really interesting. But Memphis is a team, like you said. I think Memphis is a team that deserves to kind of be on watch a little bit, and not necessarily that you're expecting a lot from them, but you're expecting them to do something that's going to have significant ramifications on the future. Something this season is going to get done. The question is what and how does it ripple affect the rest of the rest of how they move forward for real.
Yeah, no, it's definitely on both ends. Whether it's the moves that they make going forward, or just seeing how this team, after like again all this whole debacle like looks like on the court. Because again, Zach Edey's look good. Jaren Jackson, even though he's had a slow start this season, is still playing decently well. And you just have a bunch of talent on the team with John Morant potentially coming back from injury. It does seem like doom and gloom over there in Memphis, but I still think there's like hope in a trade, but also hoping that this talent still pulls it around. So it's going to be definitely interesting to see. We want to hear your thoughts down below. Agree or disagree with any of our picks. We want to hear who you guys have for each of these questions. Again, teams that you're selling high on, teams or players selling high on, teams or players that you're buying low on, and guys, are you just kind of maybe taking a little look at it? Also, we want to hear your thoughts on the whole Chris Paul situation and that question regarding the Clippers and Brooklyn Nets. So let us know your thoughts down below. Jay, we have reached another end of a fantastic episode. Thank you guys for watching. What do you want to tell these beautiful people before we sign out?
Yeah, man. I mean, clearly the NBA is in full swing there, not holding back whatsoever. And there's never a dull moment. It feels like just when you think things are slowing down, just it's always something. It feels like so.
Hey.
Giannis, AD, Ja, Lamelo, Zion, Trey, like it's a lot of action going on this season, man. And the East is better than we expected, which I think is also shaking things up a little bit because I think teams that we thought were going to kind of stay out the way this season might want to make a win now move to position themselves because things have never felt as wide open as they are. You got people wondering whether or not the Orlando Magic are better without Paulo Banchero. You got people thinking the Los Angeles Lakers might be better without LeBron James. It's a lot of stuff in this soap opera that we call the NBA, and we just plan on covering every second of it. So make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you keep listening to the podcast and you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't know what to tell you at this point.
Yeah,
I'm not
we're
gonna lie.
approaching 80 subscribers, man. The last episode actually, like I mentioned, did pretty damn well. We got like a good like extra like 5 or 6 of you just to subscribe from that episode alone. So again, if you like what you hear, if you like what you see, keep adding along to the party, man. There's a lot of I never want to hear that the NBA is boring ever again. The NBA is the best league in the world. We love talking about it, and we're going to continue to talk about it here on the Hit Your Free Throws page. Again, check out all of our individual socials down below as well. Check us out: TikTok, Instagram, Broadcast Networks, YouTube. You can find us everywhere, so you have no excuse not to listen to TVJ talking basketball every single weekend. We will be back next week to do that as well as we go closer and closer to Christmas Day. It's a lot of good stuff happening in the NBA right now, and with the trades packing up, the NBA basketball being as great as ever, there's a lot of stuff to talk about. So we are super duper excited to do that going forward. But yeah,
Yeah.
thank you guys for watching this episode. Hope you all have a fantastic day. This is TV. This is Jay. We're signing out. Peace.
Peace.